Hey there, I am back with another deck review, and today we're going to be looking at the August deck from the King's Wild Shorts line. This is Robin Hood. Now, if you've never heard of the King's Wild Shorts line, definitely recommend checking it out. It's the monthly subscription service from King's Wild Project and designer Jackson Robinson. And every single month, you get a uniquely designed deck. Jackson draws on some of the most amazing inspirations in creating his deck, and this one right here is no exception. So go check out some of my past videos if you want to see some of the decks that he's done. But this one obviously was inspired by the tale of Robin Hood. Robin Hood is the legendary English outlaw known for stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. He's been depicted tons of times throughout history, from ballads of centuries ago to more modern 20th century depictions like the Disney rendition, or Robin Hood Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner, or even the comedic version, Robin Hood Men in Tights. So lots of different depictions of Robin Hood, but this one really is just a fantastic one. So let's jump into it and take a look. All right, starting with the tuck case, it's designed to look like a book, and a kind of fabric or linen covered book, so kind of bound in linen and leather. Has very simply debossed across the front the quote title of this book, or the title of the deck, Robin Hood, done in gold foil. And you've got that green, beautiful texture, kind of just the right amount of aging and dirt on it to give it that aged look. With the green linen, and then the binding done in brown leather with accents of gold foil. It's a really striking look all the way to it. You can turn around to the spine of the book and see that beautiful aged leather, Robin Hood written again on a linen panel at the top, and then continuing through to the back, and you even get nice little imperfections printed here, like almost where the cloth was sort of gouged out at a part. The edge of the book, you can kind of see the pages, if you will, creeping out across the top, side, and onto the bottom of the deck. And then you have what's meant to kind of look like a leather strap around it, almost like it's keeping it shut. And then Robin Hood written one more time on the side for good measure. On the bottom, you have a little bit of ad copy for Jackson Robinson and King's Wild Project. And you can see that this one is printed by the Expert Playing Card Company in China. As you open it up, it opens up from the side, not from the top like a traditional deck would, but you get a nice big flap here. And on it, it's written in gold foil, aim small, shoot straight. Obviously, as Robin Hood was known for archery, it's a pretty fitting saying, but it's also one that's been used on King's Wild decks before. It shows up on a few different decks, but I believe the first appearance was on his Silver Arrow deck several years ago. It's a really beautiful and kind of classic deck from King's Wild Project, and that's, as far as I know, the first time this saying was used. Aim small, shoot straight. Now, there are no inner flaps here, which is a small kind of annoyance, just because it doesn't really stay shut when you close it up, but pretty minor there. And then on the interior, you get some absolutely fantastic printing. This is a depiction of something called marbled paper. And specifically, this kind of reminds me of like a Florentine style. Marbled paper is this technique that bookmakers, among others, would use to create these really unique and one of a kind patterns. They'd use ink kind of laid across the top of water and then just gently press the paper onto the water, and it created these patterns that really just couldn't be reproduced perfectly. And you get these fantastic flowing images, and so you can see that depicted here. Really fitting, because it was used to kind of mark the inside of books, maybe on the interior pages or interior binding. And so on the inside of his book, Jackson used that technique here. Really nice, and kind of an unexpected flourish of color on the interior. So that is the fantastic tuck case, but let's take a look at the cards. The cards themselves have a really interesting inspiration in the art style, both on the faces and the backs. They're inspired by something called the Bayeux tapestry. It's an ancient tapestry from back in the 11th century. It's a 230-foot long tapestry, has all sorts of different scenes depicting the events leading up to the Norman conquest of England. So it's a really famous tapestry, one that survived to today, and it's all done in this sort of embroidery pattern. And so the embroidering that you see on that tapestry is what inspired the art style on this deck. One of the things I love about Jackson is that he draws so much inspiration, not just in the subject matter of the decks, but even the art style really kind of draws on all sorts of different things to create his inspiration. So this is the first that I've seen that is a really embroidered style, unless maybe you count the Deck the Halls deck from a couple years ago. But here is the back design, and you can see that sort of crude embroidery style. If you zoom in close, you can even see kind of the fabric or the cloth look, almost like strands of thread that are wound around if you look in there. But it's a beautiful green scene, kind of these waves of leaves going out. And as Robin Hood was known as an archer, it's really fitting that there's kind of a stylized bullseye in the center with arrows coming out of the top and the bottom. And you'll see a nice little nod here. One of the more famous stories of Robin Hood is the fact that he shot an arrow and it split an arrow that was already in the target. So the first contestant hit a bullseye, and Robin one-upped him by splitting the arrow right down the middle. And so you can see here the arrow is splitting another arrow. Cool little touch and a nod to another one of the famous legends of Robin Hood. But beautifully done, and you can see those flows of gold foil kind of accenting in waves going all the way out. Just really nice touches of gold foil to really set this card off. Finishing out the border, you have a thin gold foil border and then kind of a crude linen backing in that brown finishing up the background. So really beautiful back design. Love the two-way look to it. Love the shine of the gold foil finishing it out. Now turning to the cards themselves, and we'll start with the extra cards, and you get an absolutely wonderful diptych joker to start with. Diptych just means two cards that go together to form a single image. And here you can see, again in that embroidered style, a really famous scene from Robin Hood. This is the fight between Robin and Little John. Little John was one of the more famous members of what Robin called his band of merry men. It was the group of outlaws that fought against the sheriff in the area and were the ones who were stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. But this is from Robin's first meeting with Little John when they fought each other with staffs on a bridge. Little John was ironically depicted usually as a huge character, 7 feet tall, and you can see him towering over Robin, much smaller here on the left. And this is just before Little John ultimately knocked him into the river, defeating him in their duel, and then ultimately joining the band of merry men. But a beautiful pattern. I love how the trees almost form this circular framing and then the glowing sun in the background. It's a really fun image. This is one you can actually get as a print from Jackson Robinson if you like the artwork you see here, and it's a really great subject for a print too. So there's your diptych joker. And again, I will say you do get a little bit of accent of gold foil around the edge, so the border is all done in gold foil as well. All right, now going to the cards themselves. I'll start with the Ace of Spades. And here it is, again paying a nod to Robin's prowess with archery. So this spade is sort of loosely mirrored by the drawn bow in the background. So you have the bow pulled back, and then the spade almost like the arrow here. So you've got another target, a gold crown at the top, and then the beautifully done custom pip and index in the corner, done again in that embroidered style. So the entire background is the brown linen, and then the entire design is almost like it's stitched on top. Really cool effect to it. Love the look of the texture on this one. And again, heavy use of gold foil accents throughout, whether it be the crown, little elements inside the target, or the border itself. So you get lots of little flashes of gold as you go through. So there's the Ace of Spades. The number cards are fairly standard, but you do get those custom pips. So the layout and everything are fairly standard, but they're given that kind of rougher look to match with the theme throughout. So you get almost just a really crude look, a tiny pip in the corner, and then the larger pip in the center of the card. And they're done in a pretty classic layout. Nothing too special on these that we haven't looked at already, but each card does have that bright, brilliant gold border. And then you get to the quartz. Now the quartz are really where you can see some of the inspiration of that Bayeux tapestry that I was talking about before. In the quartz, you really get to see some of the characters brought to life. And of course, these are going to depict famous characters from the Robin Hood story. And these go back to some of the original ballads. So these aren't necessarily all characters that you'll find depicted, in the Disney version or anything like that, but some of the famous characters throughout. Now the spades represent three of the more ubiquitous characters. You have Friar Tuck over here as a friar, but also a member of the Band of Merry Men. He was known for his drinking, and so he's got a mug of ale in his hands, and you can see that fantastic style done on here. And if you zoom in, look at his chin there, you can even see the individual stitches that were kind of depicted on this one to form the entire outfit. So really just nicely done, two-way kind of reflected design there, depicting Friar Tuck. And then on the Queen of Spades, you have Robin's love interest. This is Maid Marian, perhaps one of the most famous characters from the story, and beautifully depicted holding a rose. And I love the veil, and again, those little gold foil accents all throughout. And then, of course, the King of Spades is our hero. Robin himself was known to be just a phenomenal archer, and so he's got his bow in hand there, and usually depicted wearing green as he is here. So there's Robin. So those are the spades. The diamonds are going to be more of the same, just kind of done in that classic red. Again, you get the textured look to these. Really nicely done. I love the effect on this one. Really can't get enough. And then you get to the diamond quartz and the diamonds. So we get another three unique characters on this one. So the Jack of Diamonds, this is the Sheriff of Nottingham, the main antagonist in the story. This is the one that Robin and the Band of Merry Men were most often fighting and stealing money from. According to the legends, he was overtaxing the peasants, and so Robin would kind of even the scales by robbing from the sheriff. And so you can see him there with an overflowing bag of gold coins. Of course, you get those hits of metallic to set those coins off, as well as little bits all throughout. I will say in some areas, I think the gold gets a little bit distracting on some of the quartz. I wish it had been a little bit less. I don't know, I kind of go back and forth. I like the touches in some areas, like I love the fact that gold coins shine, but like the belt doesn't feel like as necessary of an addition. I think it would have been just as good with, gold metallic ink as opposed to true foiling, but artist decision, and I really can't complain too much about the results. The Queen of Diamonds, this is an interesting one you don't see often depicted. This right here is the Prioress of Kirklees. She was basically worked in a priory, and she was known as the one who ultimately killed Robin in the legends. Robin had gone to get a treatment that was called bloodletting, basically getting some of his blood out to maybe get toxins or something like that out, and she intentionally let out too much blood and ultimately killed him. So you see her there with the bowl of blood in her hands. Interesting footnote to that story. In later versions of the legend, the story went that right before Robin died, he knocked his bow and shot an arrow out to the spot that he wanted to be buried. And so according to legend, that spot where the arrow landed is where he's buried today. He's a fictional character, so not a true story, but interesting addition nonetheless. And again, nice little hits of gold. And then the King of Diamonds. So the King of Diamonds represents Prince John. Prince John was kind of a usurper, another one of the bad guys. He was kind of in league with the Sheriff of Nottingham, and so definitely depicted as one of the antagonists of the story as well. And you see him also depicted with the bag of gold, the gold crown, and the kind of dagger in his hands as well. So there is the King of Diamonds. So there are the three diamond quartz, and then into the club quartz, and three more characters. The King of Clubs, this is Little John. We saw him in the Diptych Joker, but here he is with his staff in hand. Love that depiction of him. He was known to be just a wizard with the staff, just an absolute fantastic fighter with the staff. The King of Clubs, This one represents the lady in waiting. So I believe she was the lady in waiting for Maid Marian, basically a maid servant or something like that. But really nicely done. I love the purple color that's used on this one. Really nice. And then the Jack of Clubs, last but not least, this is Will Scarlet, another member of the Band of Merry Men. He was said to be the best with the sword. He actually used a pair of swords in most of the legends. I like the flow of the feather coming out. And again, more hits of gold foil everywhere you look. So there's the Jack of Clubs. And we'll flip through real quick, looking at the club number cards. Nothing too special here. The rest of the aces are just normal aces outside of that ace of spades. And then we get to the last set of courts, the King of Hearts here. This is the King Richard the Lionheart. He was the kind of good guy king, if you will, and Prince John that we looked at before was kind of seen as a usurper to King Richard's throne. I love the lion armor here, and you can see that gold, the gold lions on his chest. The Queen of Hearts. This is Lady Christabel. She's actually the wife of the Jack of Hearts, Alan of Dale. Alan of Dale, another member of the Band of Merry Men. He was a musician, obviously. You can see by the lute in his hands. And this is his wife, Lady Christabel. Interesting, one that's not often depicted in a lot of the stories. So it's interesting to see her as an addition here on the Queen of Hearts with the dove in hand. So the Queen of Hearts and the Jack of Hearts, your last two courts. And then a quick look down, get these back in order. Quick look down on the rest of the hearts. Nothing too special. More of what we've looked at before, just done in that bright red color. And finishing with the Ace of Hearts. So that is the deck. Now, as far as handling on these, that's an interesting story, I guess. I will say right out of the box, in part because of some of the printing process, this came out literally as a solid brick. Like, I had to break every single card out one by one. Now, according to Jackson, that's because they didn't necessarily let enough time cool before they cut and stacked the cards, which meant that some of that foil ended up sticking. Now, that said, after I broke it out, the handling was still a little bit rough too, and it still is now. Definitely does not fan the best. I haven't exactly broken these in, but it is a little bit rough on the fans. Definitely some clumping within this. But I will say that since I opened the deck up, it's been improving pretty gradually. According to Jackson, if you use this pretty heavily, it will eventually kind of get broken in and they handle much better. He actually says he's pretty happy with the handling. For me, it's definitely rough out of the box. It does not fan well out of the box at all. But I can see some improvement already with the deck. I will also say it is a super thick deck, much thicker than normal. If you have like one of those DS1 cases or something like that, this deck won't fit in it. It's a much too fat deck. It means that these cards are much thicker than your normal card, and they're much stiffer as well. So they don't, they dribble and spring okay, but not, definitely not as easy as some of those softer ones like you get from Cardamundi or USPCC. All that said, I think it handles perfectly well for what I think the deck is good for. This is, to me, not a cardistry deck by any means. This isn't going to be the finest handling deck in your collection. This is one that you want to use for art and maybe a really interesting deck for gameplay as well. And I think for those purposes, this handles more than fine. I think, it's a great deck for that. Really, obviously, one you want to appreciate for the art. You could use this for gameplay. Less so for Magic or cardistry. I don't really think that's where this deck's going to find its main use. But I think it is an absolutely fantastic and inspired deck, and one I think everybody should have one of these in their collection if you're a collector of custom decks. Now, this is just one version of the deck. I do actually get two different versions. I also get the limited version. I mentioned this is a subscription service. There is the standard version of the deck, which is unlimited, and then there's a limited deck that you can also get as part of it, and that's this one here. Now you will see there's a few differences. The font on the spine here is a little bit bolder, and you get a little sticker here denoting this one as a limited edition. You can see I've got 265 out of 500. And you get a little bit different styling and kind of more ornate styling on the book itself. And you can see these here side by side. Large, the biggest difference is going to be this band here, which is really amped up with this arrow and flourishes of silver. So a much more ornate band, but even more ornate bits around the spine. So an amped up design to the deck itself, but otherwise the cards inside are exactly the same. So this is one that I personally leave sealed and kind of keep as a collection. I have a bunch of the limited decks as well, so I keep those sealed, but I do like to open up the standard decks. There's also a gilded version, not one that I get, same cards, just gilded edges and an even more ornate tuck box, but I get the limited and the standard. So that's it. That is the look at the Robin Hood deck, the August deck from the King's Wild Shorts line. Hope you enjoyed this look inside at some of the stories and inspirations. I think it's an absolutely fantastic deck, and I love that Jackson is really upping his game with some of the Shorts decks lately. They've always been good. Lately, they've been great. So thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe for more deck reviews and unboxings, and I'll see you for the next one.